Okay, I have a gaslight alert for you today. Gaslighting is when you manipulate someone into questioning their own ability to understand the world. And the new gaslight phrase of the week from the Trump administration is, we are now testing more than South Korea per capita. And this is going to be a painful one because it is such weaponized disinformation. But I do think it's important to do this. This is the anatomy of disinformation for you to understand very, very clearly. So we have a coronavirus pandemic. The way we find cases is by doing tests for the virus. Right now, they've all been RNA-based tests. An antigen test is now in development and may soon be available. But so far, you find cases by doing RNA tests, which require a number of different elements in order to do the test. So far, so good. South Korea and the United States find their first respective cases of coronavirus within hours of each other. We often say January 20th. I think one was January 19th, the other was the 20th. With the time difference, it may have been simultaneous. Doesn't matter. Within hours of each other, South Korea and the United States confirm their first case. South Korea immediately develops a test, ramps up testing capacity, tests lots of people, establishes fever clinics to isolate people who test positive, contact traces exposed contacts of infected people, puts them in home isolation, and they do a fantastic job with the virus, all while not being authoritarians. Remember, South Korea is ranked higher than the United States on the democracy index. That was January. Now, Trump didn't do that. We didn't get much testing capacity until the end of March, which is essentially 2 whole months during which South Korea developed, tested, contact traced, et cetera. We started to ramp up testing at the end of March. If you looked at the numbers of tests that we were doing in the first part of March, it was numbers like 600 tests in an entire day. We got up to a few thousand tests per day. Our testing capacity was terrible at the time. We were about 50th or 55th in the world per capita, maybe even worse. I don't remember exactly. Now, compare our testing numbers in early March to South Korea's positive test results. By early March, South Korea was finding sometimes 800 positive cases in a day. And there was a period in early March where South Korea was doing so much testing that they were finding more cases than the total number of tests we were doing. Understand that comparison. There were days in early March, South Korea and the US had our first confirmed case on the same day. Days in March where we would do X number of tests and South Korea would have that same X number of positive tests because they were doing so much more testing than us. This allowed South Korea to stop the spread very, very early. Now, over time, during March, April, into May, our testing rate continued to really lag. We were testing 50th in the world, then 45th in the world per capita, then 41st. Currently, our testing rate is about 30,000 people per million. That puts us 40th worldwide in testing per capita. This is as of a few hours ago. We are behind Singapore and Canada in per capita testing, but we are ahead of the Czech Republic as examples. And as we were failing during March and April, reporters kept asking Trump and other officials, you keep saying we're doing a lot of tests, but what about per capita? Because per capita we're not. It wasn't clear whether Trump understood what per capita meant and or was pretending not to. We didn't know. The talking point was we've done more tests than anyone in the aggregate. But of course, per capita was what was relevant at the time. The new talking point now is, hey, everybody's talking about South Korea. We now have more per capita tests than South Korea. That is true. And in fact, our testing per capita is now double that of South Korea's. But why is this gaslighting? It's gaslighting because South Korea barely has any cases. There is no point now in comparing us to South Korea because South Korea barely has an outbreak at this point in time. Look again at South Korea's curve. South Korea hasn't had more than 150 cases in a day since March 11th. That's not a typo. I want to say that again. South Korea has not had more than 150 cases since March 11th. In the US, we regularly have 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 deaths per day. South Korea has not had a day with more than 150 cases since March 11th. That's 2 months ago. So the point is, Of course, our per capita testing rate is now greater than South Korea's. They have nobody to test because almost no one has the virus. We have a third of all the global cases. South Korea has 258 deaths total. Okay, total. South Korea has 258 deaths. The Trump administration is now bragging that our per capita testing rate is higher than South Korea's, but it's actually an embarrassment. It took months for us to get our testing rate to match that of a country that essentially eliminated the outbreak 2 months ago. And we are still only 40th in testing per capita. There is no serious reason to even mention South Korea anymore, other than to say that's what we should have done. They handled it correctly and we didn't. This is the new Trumpist talking point. Trump is using it. Kayleigh McEnany used it yesterday during her press briefing. We need to be testing more. South Korea doesn't even have sick people to test anymore. There's no reason to continue comparing ourselves to South Korea at this point. South Korea is an instructive example for what we should have done on January 20. That's almost 3 months ago. Let's take a quick break, almost 4 months ago, sorry. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back right after this.